Hello and welcome back to Decision Makers, the podcast taking you inside the boardroom and into the world of football where all of the decisions are made. I'm Hugh Woozencroft, and with me once again the former Premier League defender Curtis Davies and Marlon Fleischmann, Managing Director at Unique Sports Group. Gentlemen, thank you for being with me once again. I'm hoping that we get another great discussion because it's a very intriguing topic today, I think, for anyone that's played football, but for also all of us who probably have more interaction with ex-players than we do current players. We'll be talking about career transition today. I'm delighted to say, joining us, the former Queen's Park Rangers man, Jamie Mackie. Jamie, how are you?
Yeah, very well, mate. Hope you're all well.
We are. And we're going to start with you, I think, Jamie, because we're going to talk about retirement and all the things that go into making that decision, but also, I guess, moving across into a new world, which you are now. Delighted to see you doing so well in media, of course, with Sky Sports as well after your playing career. But we'll go back to, I think, retirement and what life has been like for you since you decided to make that decision.
Yeah, I mean, it's really strange, to be honest with you. If you go back to when I retired, mate, it was actually in the COVID year, which, being honest, when I look back, it was probably a good thing and might have helped me because my last game was in front of no fans at Wembley when I was at Oxford, and we lost that game. So it was kind of, I knew that it was at the end. My body physically wasn't ready. I couldn't do it anymore. And then going into the first season being retired, there was no fans in the stadium. So when I kind of transitioned into watching games instead of playing, I didn't look and go, oh, I was desperate to be playing because there was no atmosphere. There was that kind of weird feeling in the ground that I wouldn't have enjoyed playing in anyway. So I think that kind of helped my transition. And then time moves very quickly after that. And I think it's just about being prepared, Hugh. I think I had a lot of interest after playing football, and not just the media and the career that I've gone into now, apart from the media. So I had something to hit the ground running with, and I think that's what's helped me so much.
You mentioned quickly there the career that you've gone into outside of football. We obviously see you, like I say, on the TV regularly. What else are you doing since your retirement?
Yeah, so I love doing the work on the TV. As you know, I love the game still. I've always had a huge passion in football. That's why I played it. And so doing that's great, and being able to stay in touch with the game. But what I've done is I've done my qualifications and nearly finished now in financial management and wealth management. And I work for a company now, look after and work with a lot of sort of professionals who are transitioning or still in the game, and obviously businessmen and people who own companies as well. So completely different world from football, but one I'm loving and just trying to learn as much as I can the whole time.
And another ex-player alongside me here, Curtis Davies. Is it similar for you? You've obviously just recently retired, but this early stage, how's it been?
I think when Jamie speaks about, he retired during COVID, so when he was at games, watching games for Sky Sports, there were no fans, he didn't have that feeling of missing it. I've come out of the game, gone straight into Sky Sports, and I'm watching games with fans, and I'm still not missing it, which it's weird because I feel disappointed that I don't miss it because it was part of my life for so long. But at the same time, it's a welcomed thing knowing that I was ready. And I think when Jamie speaks about his body was giving up on him and said that he knew that his body couldn't probably do it again, I was in a position where mentally I probably had checked out. I played 39 games as a 39-year-old that season for Cheltenham, and I could have gone again. But the big thing was for me, particularly how my season started, in terms of no wins in 11 games, I kind of, at that time, probably made a decision then that this was going to be my last season, and I just wanted to see it out, play as many games as I could, try and help the team to avoid relegation, which we unfortunately couldn't do. But mentally, I was ready to go into that next level, that next stage, of my career. And I always knew that the Sky Sports stuff was going to be an opportunity for me. And I think kind of once the EFL deal and the 1,000 games was announced, that's when I kind of put my finger on the trigger and was like, right, that's it. I'm just going to work towards working with Sky on that, and that's going to be my job when I retire.
Okay, we're going to come to the moment that you guys decided it was time to hang up. It's interesting to you. you say you actually played on after you decided it was going to be the end. I wonder if the same is true for Jamie. But before we get there, I do want to ask you, Marlon, about the process from your perspective. We've spoken a lot on other episodes about creating strategy for your players. This is in terms of their career, for example. Does that strategy include taking a player towards the end of their career? Do you plan for that?
Yeah, you have to. I think where we are now is you will look at a player's career and maybe, Jamie and Curtis have said they knew maybe a year ahead. I think from the agent's perspective, you'll do a contract and you'll look at it and go, right, is that the last? And at that point, you're having some hard conversations saying, look, we're not sure where the next contract may come from or at what value, what is happening, where's your head at? Do you want to keep working? And usually the players will take a final 1-year contract and maybe just suss out how they get on in that final year. And it's interesting, Jamie, you said physically and Curtis, you said mentally you checked out. Is there ever a point where you go, you just know? There's either that one defining game or one defining performance, and no matter what anyone says to you, you just know.
On my point of view, like I say, it wasn't that defining game, but I honestly can say in that October, I thought about retiring. Like, thought about just handing in and saying I'm done, which isn't like me. And I'm not a quitter. So that's what I had to just check myself and made sure I stayed to help the team. Go on.
Well, I was going to say, was it a moment or was it something that grew over several weeks? I know at that stage of time, Cheltenham were in a really difficult position down the bottom of the table, weren't getting results. Did that play a part in terms of your mental position was, where you thought, I just can't do this anymore, more because of the results and how things were going? Or was it like, like you say, you wake up in the morning and just think, I can't go anymore? What was it?
It was just almost disillusioned with football. Just like, I'm looking at these players in the training ground, and in my opinion, we were getting bad advice. And it's hard for me to say because I signed because the manager was my friend, but it just the advice we were getting wasn't good and we were losing games. So it was a hard dynamic for me in the fact that I've signed here to play for my friend. I am his friend, but he's my manager, so I can't then go and not that I know everything, but I can't then go and try and help him out because that comes across as stepping on toes. So I was a bit perplexed with it. I thought we had a better group than where we were in the league. And in the end, like I say, after that 11 games, I was like, oh, why am I doing this? Like I literally played the last season because the season before at Derby, I hadn't had enough game time and I wanted to retire. That's always said, I wanted to retire on my feet, not on my backside, sitting on the bench. So that's why I wanted to have that last year at Cheltenham and then go from there. And I'm playing every game, but I don't know where a win's going to come from. And mentally, that's tough. Listen, I've been in struggles, I've had relegations, of course, but if you honestly look around and you're thinking like, I don't know where a win's going to come from, I think that's a hard thing to drive yourself in every day, knowing that, oh, we're going to lose this week, and that mentality has never been me, but it was becoming me. And I was at that point where I was thinking, well, I don't want this to rub off on anyone else because I'm meant to be a leader and an experienced player. And I think the thing that actually, I say, saved me was the call up to Sierra Leone, because it was a welcomed positivity where somebody's reached out to me to do something positive for my country, and it was a different environment. So after going into that environment, being part of that for the couple of weeks I was there, coming back, it's almost like I had a new lease of life for football and just accepted Cheltenham for what it was, and then went from there, and then, like I say, hung around and made sure that I did my utmost best for the team.
You, Jamie, was different. Curtis did try and play forever. You probably would have played forever if you could have. Obviously, your body in the end was telling you it was time to stop. Again, I'll ask you, was it a specific moment, a specific injury that year where you just thought, my body can't do this anymore? Or was it, again, that feeling week in, week out, game to game, because you physically can't do what you did previously, that actually you weren't enjoying it and maybe your mental position was also going in a direction you didn't like?
Yeah, I mean, everything Curtis says there, I can feel exactly all the sort of emotions and mentally that he went through. I totally get that things change as you get older. I think that for me, it kind of drifted into this state that I was at QPR and I'd had a couple of injuries and a bad one on my back, and I had an operation. And my game wasn't about being technical, as the lads know. So for me to adapt into suddenly kind of getting into pockets and not having contact, I was baffled anytime I was in the hole. So I couldn't really like change my game. So my whole game was about training so hard in the week to make sure I could play on the weekend and kind of tick all the boxes. I then signed for Oxford and I dropped down a level. And my whole sort of career up to that point was sort of starting at 18, playing a bit of non-league and kind of like an upward trajectory through my career. And it was the first time where it was like, wow, I'm going down. Does that mean I can't kind of reach any sort of high for myself again? And I felt that. And with the injury, it meant that I had that in my head mentally. And then with the injury, it was like I found it very hard to train every day. And they understood that that was part of the deal with me going there. But it didn't sit well with me mentally that I couldn't train and play without pain the whole time. Therefore, my performances, I couldn't offer a lot. And I didn't like that feeling because I love playing football. And if my body was still good, I would have carried on, no doubt, for a couple more years. It wasn't a problem. It wasn't a mental thing at that point. But when it got to that last bit, it was like there was, when Marlon says, or if you said, was there one point? I think I drove to Oxford. We had a training game getting ready for the playoffs in COVID. And on the way home, I stopped down the M40 like 4 times to stretch my back off on the side of the road. And I was like, nah, I was like, this is the pain was like overtaking the enjoyment. And I just thought, right, I've given everything. I can look in the mirror and say, I've got no regrets. So I made a call that it was the end of the season. And then I was sort of at peace with it from day one because I knew I couldn't have achieved any more or put my body through any more. I think where players struggle, Curtis might have an idea on this, but from what I've seen, people struggle, in my opinion, where they've kind of not maximized their career and they've got regret, or they haven't got something to go into after football, and they're the ones I see struggle. I wasn't in that camp, so I feel lucky.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you, actually. That opportunist side of it. I retired because, as I said, I knew that there was going to be something there for Sky with the 1,000 games. Was you quite comfortable retiring, knowing that, yes, physically my body can't handle it, but in the interim, if I do retire, I can do the Sky stuff, and then you've now qualified for your financial stuff. Was that a big factor in your retirement as well?
Yeah, I think knowing that I had a plan, and a lot of my friends had retired before me, being older pros, and they always said to me when I signed my deal at Oxford, I was working with Marlon and the guys, and it was like I knew in my head, realistically, this is my last contract. So I had in my head, right, in these 2 years, do everything I can as a pro, but really plan for what's going to happen next and use that contract as that. And that's what I did. I sort of flirted with the idea of being a coach. And I thought that for the first year. Funny enough, I was really good mates in a room with John Messinho. So it was always like us talking about football, and he's gone on to be a manager. And I was like, flirted with the idea, but thought, no, it's not for me. And then I start doing my qualifications for this. So I think it played a factor in the sense that I knew that I didn't have to put my body through that and not enjoy it how I want to and just take a contract for the sake of taking money or progress with my next career. So I think having that lined up made the transition like super easy.
I wanted to ask you both really about, once you've made that decision, telling those around you, telling your family, telling your coaches as well, I guess even telling your agent. I'll start with family though, and I guess the coaches. What was it like for you, Curtis? Because I guess it was you said you decided at the end of the season that was going to be it. So what did you do? Did you wait until the end of the season to tell family and coaches? Did you tell them straight away? How did it work?
It was a transitional period of that as well. It was the first and foremost my wife, sitting down having conversations with her from that October, again around, do I just retire now? Which it was an honest conversation, which again I'm glad I didn't do, and that wouldn't have been me at all to to down tools. But yeah, it kind of was decided, and then in terms of my family, it was as it got closer towards the end of the season, because I didn't want to kind of put the burden on my family in terms of my dad and my brother and my sister and stuff like that, and then change my mind, because it's all good when the chips are down and I'm depressed and annoyed about what we're doing in the games, and then come the end of the season, maybe we do stay up, and I'm like, oh, I can give it another year. So I kind of kept it in-house in my home with my wife, and I didn't even tell my kids, obviously. And then when it came to the actual point, the end of the season, it was kind of, it was done. So once I finished that game against Stevenage, I was crying on the pitch, bawling my eyes out, and obviously we had been relegated, but a combination was, yes, we've been relegated, but this is my last game in English football. But I couldn't actually officially retire then because I was going away on international duty. So even though I was going to be committed to that international duty with Sierra Leone, if I then retire before going, it comes across like I don't care. So I went away on international duty, managed to score on my official debut, got 4 points for the team in the World Cup qualification, and then again crying again on the pitch after that 2-2 draw against Burkina Faso. And then I realised, no, this is all she wrote, that's it, I'm done. But my family knew at that point that they were going to be my last 2 games. So my dad was out there watching me, got to see my goal. So that was a very proud moment for me. But I knew that was me done. And basically, once I got back from there, it was just, usually it'd be do a few jogs, get ready for pre-season. It was like, well, what do I do now? And it was a case of, whilst the kids were all at school, it was all right. You can do the school runs, you keep your routine. But after that, a few people are going back into pre-season and stuff like that. And then you're kind of, in a way, redundant. You've got nothing to do because you're not working for Sky because they're not doing pre-season games. You're not doing this, you're not doing that. So at first that bit's strange. But then once the season starts and you sign for Sky Sports and you're able to go to the games, I got straight back into it.
You can enjoy a long holiday. You've earned it after all those years in professional football, mate. What do I do, he says? Go to Barbados or something like that. Jamie, what was it like for you telling family, probably telling coaches as well? Like you said, you probably knew that was the last 2 years. Going into that contract, did your family, did they know that? Were you kind of like, the time at Oxford will be it? Or was it really when you got towards the end of those 2 years that you started to tell those around you?
Yeah, I didn't tell anyone when I signed for Oxford, right, I'm gonna sign this deal and that's me 100% done, because Curtis said there's a lot of emotion. We love football and it's like you can get sucked into play another year. And if my body felt great within that 2-year period and the club had wanted me to stay, I would have stayed, no problem at all. So it was just about planning for the future. In my own head, I'd said to my wife, right, I've got to use these 2 years to establish what I'm going to do. But it didn't affect me, or none of my teammates would have known that that's what I was planning off the pitch. And then it got to the end. I think COVID had a big part to play because the season got stopped, I believe, in, what was it, April or something. And we were in the playoffs. And so we had this long time off when we were at home and we had to train on our own. So for me, at that stage with my body, it was like, well, I'm basically doing a whole pre-season to come back for what was 2 semi-finals, and eventually we got to the final. So I'd done a whole pre-season. At the end of the game and in the final, the lads had probably maybe 3 weeks off because the way the league worked, and they were back in doing another pre-season. And I was just like, no, it wasn't right. So I hadn't told anyone, actually, to be honest, that I was retiring. I sort of floated the idea. My wife knew that I was struggling physically, probably more than anyone. And I hadn't really floated the idea. I didn't even tell anyone. I just knew it was at Wembley. There was no fans at the game. We lost. I didn't actually come on. I was in the squad. And I was playing that kind of role. I'd come on at the end and just trying to help the younger players as much as I can. I enjoyed that. It's a really good talent there and it was good to watch. But when I was on the pitch, I had that moment like Curtis did. I knew in my head, I said, that's me. I'm not gonna play again, especially knowing that next season there's not going to be any fans. So what was the point dragging it out? It's not like my kids could see me one more time. So I then told the family after that, spoke to the manager and said, I don't know if you think about keeping me next year. Or he asked me if I'm going to stay. And I said, look, that's me. I'm done. And that was it. So I hadn't told anyone until the point that I actually retired, actually.
So Marlon, I've just gone through, I guess, the guys breaking the news to their most significant people in their lives and themselves, really, in terms of making that decision. From your perspective, how does it work when a player comes in and says, I'm thinking about ending it soon? Because I imagine that you guys, with your forward planning and your strategy, for some players, you're actually saying to them 6 months before the end of their contract, maybe even earlier, what are we going to do when we get to the summer? What are you thinking? So are you maybe applying a bit of pressure to the older players to be quite clear on what they want to do next?
I think we use the 2 to 3 years before that point to sort of play with different ideas of what a future could look like outside of the game. And you sort of hone down on the interest that the players have. And, for some, it is coaching. That is, the love of football is they want to stay in it, and coaching is the next best thing. Some of it is media, broadcasting, working with us as scouts or agents. There's a whole different area that players can move into, but you're having those conversations well in advance of that. Okay, that's me, I'm done. Because the worst thing in my eyes, and what I'm scared of for any of the clients we have, is getting to that day where that's me, I'm done, and then thinking about it, because you can lose 6 months to a year turns into 2 years, turns into 3 years, and you haven't pinned down what you want to do. And you can't force a player to go into coaching if the heart's not in it, but maybe they have to try it for 3 months to then find it's not for me, or do some scouting and go, it's not for me. But if you've not, with the player, worked to see what they really want to do, and only have that conversation at the end, then you've missed 2 to 3 years worth of planning, which are really, really crucial to setting them up for success outside of football.
In terms of the transition, I think we should move now to that point after the playing career. Do you choose to really support players in terms of what they do next? I know you said 2 to 3 years out, we've got that, exploring different things. Once they've actually come to the end, do you then shake hands and say it was a great, relationship, thanks for the memories? Or are you still really involved in players' lives and careers in trying to help them? Even if, like, say, Jamie's gone into wealth management, do players come to you and say, I want to try something different, I want to get into wealth management, and you say, well, I'll give my accountant a call, see who knows, how do you try and help with the next step?
I think when you've had a player for, best part of 5, 6, 7, 8 years for a career, your friends as well as business colleagues, and I think at the end of it, no matter what the player decides they want to do, you're still a friend, you're still around. And it's not as there's no cold cut, thanks, see you later, thanks the last 10 years, away you go. You do keep in contact. I think the hard thing is, if the player moves into a field of employment completely outside of football, the natural conversations during the week about performance and training, they do stop because it's not needed. But where you can still try and help each other, you do look to do that.
Yeah, I think it's transactional versus emotional. Whilst there's no transactional relationship going on anymore, it's still, you feel slightly attached, because if you have overseen the last 6, 7 years of their career, you still want to keep in touch. But it might be, like, say, in Jamie's field, for instance, Jamie might come and say, oh, I was thinking of trying to help this and that player. I see that he signed a new deal here or there. Like, would he be interested in a chat? And just that networking side of it is probably still going to be very important, particularly if you go into a field like Jamie's gone into, which is away from football, but relates to, I guess, people with wealth. So therefore, it's a trusted person that we know, and we can allow somebody that works with us to then go and speak to Jamie.
I'm really asking because I expect there to be some sort of support network for players leaving the game, because we know so many players do struggle with their life after football, particularly mental health. And the thing that I think a lot of players, and you've said it already, Curtis, help them, is that they've got something to go into, something that they can focus their minds on. Marlon, does the PFA help? Do the club help? Is there someone within the club that says, all right, you might be leaving, I don't know, Oxford United, but have you thought about what's next? Is there someone in the PFA who'll get in touch with players and say, here are your options, if there is something that you're interested in doing? Or is it just all on you and your ex-client to try and find a new life?
I think there's a lot more that we could all do in terms of exit pathways. Not just for players that are retiring, but retirement can come as an academy player who gets released from the system and doesn't find another club. So exit strategies, no matter what the age, I think there is more that everyone can do. And you know, unless we talk more about it and the consequences and what wraparound care you need to put in place, we're not going to get there. And I can only say it from our side. We've sat and we've gone, right, we need to do more. What can we do? But that question of what can we do, everyone needs to look at themselves to answer that one. PFA, clubs, agencies, everyone does, because ultimately these guys have either signed with you as a football club or they've signed with you for representation services. You've got a duty of care all around you. PFA, FA, everyone's got a duty of care that just because a player has given so much to the sport, when they decide that's me, either through choice or through being released and not finding another club, there should be more active pathways or opportunities open to them.
Yeah. When it comes to the PFA, I think PFA sometimes get criticised because they apparently don't do enough for players post-game. But what I would say about the PFA is anybody that needs anything, you reach out, it's there. So it might not be that they're visible and they're coming to you with, oh, you can do this, you can do that, and knocking on your door. Because how many players are PFA registered players? You know, just thousands and thousands. Whereas it's as simple as when you start thinking about, I want to do this or that course, or I'm thinking about going down this line, like Jamie going down the financial side, you investigate and you say, right, can I do that course through the PFA? Oh, yeah, I can do it through the PFA. PFA will fund half of it. Or you find your own course, you go to the PFA and say, here's a registered course for financial, and they'll pay half of it. So whilst talking about they might not help that post-career, actually the transition whilst you are still be in it, like, so for instance, I did my degree in professional sports writing and broadcasting through the PFA. So I never necessarily, at that time when I did it, was definitely going to be a pundit, but I was interested in it, and I knew that it would be something that won't necessarily get me a job, but will give me more, I guess, kudos in terms of I've done the hard yards and actually worked towards it. So I think it's just really important that, in my opinion, players use the PFA as much as possible. It's there for us as players. I think I spoke to a friend of mine who is a former player and spoke to him about his construction company and said, oh, well, have you spoken to the PFA about doing this or doing that? Have you had any of the courses that you've done? Because it's his business, but he's on the tools. I said, have you asked the PFA for any funding on those courses that you've done? And he's like, no, I never thought about that. I'm like, well, this is the thing. It's I guess the awareness needs to be maybe bigger, but at the same time, like, this is our institution as players. We're lucky enough to be members of that institution. And if anyone reaches out, there's so much that you can do through the PFA.
So there is somebody, at least, who will help you cope with that change when you're leaving football. I do want to talk to you guys about how you coped after you left football. Jamie, what was it like? You mentioned earlier, football is all you ever wanted to do. You also had that, of course, those targets in your life. You climbed the ladder, you got to the top in the Premier League, you got to international football. You'd always had those targets. And then suddenly, in terms of, the goals that you've got on a day-to-day basis, that has all gone. The friendships, the camaraderie that you have, the buzz of going out in front of a crowd and scoring goals, that all goes away from you pretty much at one point. How did you cope with that?
Yeah, do you know what? That's a weird feeling, Hugh. I'll be honest with you, and it's very, very hard to prepare for. I think that there's like a lot of variables that you can make your life easier and the transition smoother if, like I said, like I work with a lot of players now in terms of getting your ducks in a row in terms of your finances. That's one thing that you can box off and try and be clever in your career. The next one Curtis has already touched on is reaching out to people you know, whether it's the PFA or having an idea and like Marlon said, a strategy 2 or 3 years. You know as a player when you're coming to the end, Q, unless, which does happen, obviously you have a career-ending injury. I understand that. But if you know you're getting to an age and it's going to come, I feel that like those things make the transition easier. And I think I touched on earlier that I knew that I'd sort of I certainly had maximised all the potential I had in football. So it just made it easier. I'll forever miss this. This is always going to live with me, like the changing room, the buzz of the changing room, the fact that Curtis will say this, you can be Curtis was 39 playing, which is incredible, but he's having banter with like 18-year-olds all the way through.
Yeah.
And it's like there's not a care in the world, Hugh, in the training ground. It's not like you've got HR around the corner. It's like it's all on the table in the change room. It's brilliant. It's great banter. It's great fun. They're the bits day to day that you miss, because when you're in it, and this is what I try and work with players on now, is you don't at any level realize how much of a bubble that you live in. Like, everything's done for you. It's like militant in terms of the organization. You've got WhatsApp groups now saying what to wear, what time you've got to be there. I don't know how you could be late or go to the wrong place. And I think that, just to touch on the point that you guys were making before, that like a duty of care and from agents, and I was very lucky with the agency, because I wasn't like Curtis, who had Sky lined up. They actually put me into Sky, the agency, and helped me that way. And I did a write on a couple of shows, and it grew from there. So I was lucky with their support. But as a player, what I really got to touch on is that I feel that like players have got to take more responsibility, because, like I said, the life they're living when you play football is a bubble, concentrated, lots of pressure. I understand all of that, but you also do have time. And I feel that like the players have got to take a bit more responsibility, realizing that you can't just leave it to get to the end of your career and then expect to have all of this help. You've got to take it upon yourself to ask the questions, make yourself aware, learn something, or decide what you really want to do. At the end of the day, if we're being brutally honest with it, why is it down for a club to look after me after I played for them? It was just an employer. That's all it was. My agents got me the deals and worked well. They've been paid. I've got the money that I want. That's fine. Like, I understand they want to be a duty care, but I think it works both ways. And I think players need to learn now to take more responsibility and really gear up to the end of their career.
It's interesting to hear that, because I think one of the hardest conversations you can have with your client is the end is near. And there's two types of ways that conversation can go. It can go the sensible way of, okay, let's start that planning process. But there's also the other side, and Jamie and Curtis, you would have known the characters. They don't want to hear it. And it's like, no, I'm invincible. No, I'm going to play on till I'm 40. I'm going to play on, I'm going to play on, I'm going to play on. And at times you do feel like saying, look at the contracts, look at the amount of opportunities being open to you. It's coming harder and harder year on year to get that contract. It is coming to an end. No, I'm playing on. I feel great. There's almost not a sense of invincibility or delusion, but it's a sense of, I get it. The player doesn't want to look at the end. They're caught up in the here and now, that they played 90 at the weekend. They're fine. They're not looking at next year. But we still need to have those conversations with them, but they do push back.
What's the toughest one? You obviously don't have to name names, but the toughest conversation you've had with a client in terms of trying to make it clear to them that the time might come. Because I think it's probably not just them. You've probably got wife, children, family, parents staring at you saying, your job is to get a contract for my player, my partner. You're our agent. Do your job. And you're trying to say, I don't know, I'm trying.
It's hard. There's everyone's difficult, but one example is a player that refused to believe that there were no offers for him. And he didn't have a bad last season, but it wasn't a stellar season. And he came out of the championship, and okay, no problem. You automatically think there'll be another championship club, there'll be a League One, there'll be a League Two club. But I had to sit down with him and go through all the clubs, all the responses. There wasn't any offers. There wasn't anything in the MLS. There wasn't anything from the Turkish leagues. And you're sitting there going, look, it's not personal. Don't take it personally. The spot isn't there. The contract isn't there. And all you can do is go through each club, explain the feedback, and hope that it's resonance. But like you said, when you know the families, you know the kids, you know the parents, it's really hard having that conversation. But it's the reality. You can't sugarcoat it, right? You can't sugarcoat it. If there's no offers on the table, there's no offers. This is my point, Marlon. It can be made easier by the player if they plan throughout their career that, you'll have it, and I know you have had it, that players are scrambling maybe at 32, 33 because they've done the wrong thing financially. Therefore, they're in trouble and they need that contract. Then the expectations on you as an agent
to go and produce this contract that me and you both know isn't there for a 33-year-old anymore. You can't claw that money back. And this is why making sure that you're organised and you've got all of your outside world in place ready for retirement is better. It's so easy. It's easier said than done, because you can be in the change room, like I said, and you do feel you feel old, but you're actually very young and you've got a long time to live. I think that people struggle more, like that character, for argument's sake, you said there, is because they haven't planned. I mean, you shouldn't need a contract right at the end, should you?
No. But and this is the bigger worry for me moving forward from this, is that each year for the last 3 years, I've seen it become harder and harder for any player that's got the number 3 at the start of their age to get a contract. The way the game is going now, and we spoke about it in some other episodes about the amount of money and time and effort being put into the signing the best under 20s, the younger squads. The squads are getting younger. The opportunities for older players are becoming smaller and smaller by the season. And that's going to have the knock-on effect that a player's career, at the point at which they retire, is naturally going to come younger and younger. So the conversations we're having now at 31, 32, suddenly I'm thinking, well, actually, the minute a player turns 27, 28 now, you've got it on the horizon. And that you wouldn't have thought about that 4 or 5 years ago. But that's the reality of the market.
It used to be the peak.
Well, that's why... I think to myself, I left Hull City at 32 and signed for Derby. And I signed for Derby on a 2-year deal with a 1-year option. It's mad, because that wouldn't happen now. Even though I'd played in the Premier League the year before, it still probably wouldn't be something that a team would want to do. They might take you on a year with a year option, and you probably would be achievable triggers in it, yes. But to give a 2-year an option, and then... The funny thing with me is the option favoured me because I ended up getting injured, and because I'd signed another year the year after, because I did really well, the option favoured me because it came down in terms of the amount of games I needed and stuff like that, and I got injured. So the fact that I got injured, did my Achilles, came back from that, managed to play a smaller amount of games, it favoured me. But that just wouldn't happen now. It would all be towards your games rather than your actual basic wage.
It's good to hear you guys, giving advice in terms of coping when you've retired, starting a few years before. It's all about planning, putting yourself in the right position so that when you do retire, you've got something to move on to and you can cope well. But I am still intrigued, Jamie, because you mentioned that buzzer being in the changing room. As much as you plan in terms of your career transition, there's nothing to replace that, is it? So I imagine it's mental health, right? Because you're exercising regularly when you're a professional athlete. For a lot of players, they go from 100 to 0 when they retire, and it's like, oh, do I need to set my own gym regime? Do I need to take myself down somewhere to exercise? How does it all work? You mentioned everything was kind of catered for you when you played football. Just in terms of the mental and physical health when you finished playing, how did you cope? And if there was a change for you, do you think, with your mental health, did it have a knock-on effect to those around you as well?
Yeah, I mean, we'll start on my physical health, Hugh. That took a battering because until I caught a side eye going past the mirror on holiday, then I was like, whoa, that is not me. I've got to sort that out. I was like, okay, cool. I need to get some sort of routine. I think I tell you that all the highs that you talked about are amazing. You can't replace them. Well, I haven't been able to replace them, and I can't. I think that the relief from not playing football, I don't know if Curtis felt this, is that like the anxiety and the nerves to perform well the whole time with people judging you, trying to play for a contract, trying to play for a win. I don't actually miss that at all, because I missed a lot of chances in my career, like good chances as well. So you're up that night, you can't sleep your next day. So there's plenty that I don't miss about it as well. So you can kind of caveat one with the other, and it kind of balances it out a bit. But physically, I think that I haven't had a great routine since I've retired, and I love the feeling of being fit. And now you've got the opportunity to kind of have a beer more often than you would, and all the rest of it, things that you haven't been able to indulge in before. I think that if I was giving any advice to a young player, I mean, Curtis looks like he's still playing, doesn't he? But if I was to give any advice to someone retiring, it would be that when you finish, try and slot straight into a routine. And I mean physically, because I just think for your mental health and the way you're used to feeling, and you might have a couple more beers or eat a bit more food now, then I think that if you've got a routine, something to get up for, just to start with, get up Monday morning, you're retired now, you've got something to get up for, or go in the gym. It's just something that you've done each day. And I think that will help players moving forward.
Yeah, I think that's the ideal in terms of, and I wish I had that. I'm still adapting to my schedule. I'm still trying to work out that work, family life balance, but then time for myself. I think kind of because I feel like if I've done a game on a Friday and a Sunday, and I've gone to watch this game on a Saturday, and I've done this on a Wednesday, and I feel like I've neglected my family at times. So I'm still trying to work out, right, that time is for work, that time is for family, but I do need to have this little space of time for me, because what I find with me is I'm very trendy at the moment. So I'll have 5 days where, right, I'm going to get back in the gym, and I'll do 5 days in a row going in the gym, working really hard. And then I'll have a couple of jobs and then something else next week, and I might not go in the gym for another 4 days. And then even then it'll be 1 day on, 3 days off, and I end up losing it again. So whilst Jamie was very complimentary in the way that I looked,
I didn't mean you were trendy.
I wouldn't be best pleased with my physical condition, put it that way. But I think I think that's an adaptation. Definitely, just that routine is so key to try and do it. I think my routine is scheduled by my girls, so school drop-offs, pickups, clubs. So that keeps me in a routine where my mind is ticking over. But in terms of personal care, probably not as good as it should be. But I think I do want to get into a space where, I am, be it right, every Monday morning I'm doing this, every Tuesday I'm doing this, and not for it to be regimental that it feels like a chore. I want to enjoy it, but just to try and have a trigger of, it's Monday, I've got I'm doing legs in the gym, or I'm doing uppers, or I'm going for a run, just to keep mentally, like I say, but also physically, because like Jamie said, you catch a side eye yourself and you're like, what's happened to it? But it's true, because we've done it for me, 23 years where I've had to be fit. And don't get me wrong, towards the later end of my career, it's not to say I was like ultra shredded and muscle man, but there's still a level of acceptance of your body and acceptance of what you look like and feel like. And now, because of that feeling of, I don't know if Jamie feels the same, I don't have to be fit.
Yeah.
It sometimes is easier for me to say, I won't go in today, I'll go in tomorrow. Whereas I know that as a player, if it's gym day and I need to do my legs, I'm doing my legs today because it's a Thursday and we've got a down day tomorrow and then it's game Saturday. So I'd be like triggered in to do it and a lot more discipline. But I've kind of lost that bit of discipline from retiring.
Yeah, let me just cover up my gut at this point. These boys are still shredded as far as I'm concerned anyway. Listen, before we kind of end here, I do want to just talk about the career side of things. There's definitely a personal transition as well, but also, Jamie, I'll come to you on this. Stepping into a new world in many ways, dealing with people that you haven't had to deal with, particularly, I think that's probably a big one for footballers. You are, as players, pretty much the centre of attention at a football club, very well taken care of. You then step into an office, and for many of you in new careers, particularly at the bottom of a ladder, certainly not central to how a business works or makes its money. What is that like, even going into somewhere like Sky, where you're kind of joining a roster of reporters, very much learning your trade? What was that experience like?
I think it's just one that you have to kind of have your eyes open to and just be really receptive to learning. And again, I think what I found, and I'm sure Curtis definitely has found this, is that when I was in the change room at the end of my career, Hugh, it was everything you've read was like veteran this, veteran that, or all the younger lads would call you old boy and all the rest. And you actually felt, cool, I'm actually feel old here. And then I've gone into this new industry and I'm like the youngest, like you're a kid, you're learning again. And that's what really makes you realize that football career was such a small section of my life. So yeah, going into this transition, I think that the hardest things from playing football to going into a career like mine or a different career is I found is kind of like time management and sort of completing tasks. I think that because I'm so used to having everything set out for me, like a defined schedule, and knowing when I've got a complete task, i.e. you've got a game on a week and I've got to train until then, is then sort of working that out and doing it myself, the schedule. That was the hardest bit to transition into. And I'm still working on my time management the whole time, but I'm learning on the job, as it were, and enjoying it, but completely different in terms of structure.
But Jamie, what about the people around you? How did it affect them after you retired?
Yeah, I think that like it was a hard transition, I think, for my wife and the kids, because my character's one of that, like, I'm not good at sitting down and my energy's quite high. So I think with football, it was naturally, I was away a couple of times a week, maybe away games and stuff. And just for a healthy relationship, I think it's great that that you have that time apart. And then suddenly, obviously, with studying and being here the whole time, like I was doing my studying, but I was doing it in the house. And it was like, I was just sort of there, and my wife was there. And it was like, it would be annoying and we'd annoy each other, not to the extent of it being a huge problem, but it was just, it wasn't great for the whole structure. And I think that is a big, not problem, but something you need to sort of overcome, which is different. And it goes again to like having the routine, going out the house, going to do this and giving each other time as well, because I can see why, there's a lot of changes in people's lives, whether it's divorce or financial problems after finishing playing football. A lot of it can go down as purely or as simply as having a good structure in your life where you're not under each other's feet, because you're such a young age to be together for that long the whole time.
Yeah, totally agree. That's what I say. Obviously, when people talk about divorce after football, they think it's because the money, the lifestyle. Sometimes it is, unfortunately, spending almost too much time together. I think that's something I've had to adapt to, in terms of knowing that if I'm going to potentially do a Sky game on Saturday and not to the following Saturday, that week in between, I'm pretty much just at home. So whilst my wife might have certain things and we might drop off to certain clubs, about 80% of the day we're together. And luckily my wife likes me, so it's all right.
We're not saying yours doesn't, Jamie, by the way.
No, but there will be times when it's like,
Curtis, she won't in a year, mate, if you're there.
Yeah, well, no, but the thing is, she's got me on toast at the moment, doing all the jobs around the house. I'm doing Christmas trees down from the loft and stuff like that. So she's all right now, but it's like Jamie said, it's an adaptation for not just you as a player, for your family. And whilst the kids love having you be in there, now if I am gone, it seems a bigger deal that I'm gone, rather than when I was playing football and I was gone every other week. It was like, oh, Dad's got football, no problem. Whereas now, if I'm gone in an overnighter, it's like, oh, why is Dad gone? And it's a bit more strange. So it is not only for the player, but a big adaptation for their family.
Have you had any culture shock moments in a new area where you're just like, wow, it hit you hard how different it was?
I would say no, although just had to be consciously careful with banter at selective times. probably that's the hardest thing. That like I could be on a pitch with Curtis and I played against him before, and it's like you kick lumps out of each other, or you're in the change room, you demand off each other. Some of my mates, people would think we'd hate each other the way we spoke to on the pitch, and then you're going out after and your pals, and then just in an office environment, it's very different, as Marlon knows, or his might be a bit looser than some industries, but no.
I think that is really interesting in terms of that side, because there is the banter side, and there's banter in an office, and there's banter in the Sky Sports studio. So me and Jamie have worked together a lot on Sky. So whilst we have that football group, and that still have that changing room banter in terms of former players all on the panel, you have to be realising that, yes, you are in a football group, but you're under the umbrella of Sky. So it's no longer acceptable as a Sky employee to say the things that we used to say in the changing room. So whilst we'll have the banter, it's dulled down to about a PG or a 12 if you're lucky, rather than the X-rated 18 kind of stuff. But I think it's that's a really tough side to it. Like I say, just trying to make sure that you check on your P's and Q's and stuff like that. That's definitely something that you need to be really careful of.
Is that your advice? You work with a lot of players as well at the end of their careers or moving into new things like media, and you have to give them advice in that area too. Is that the key advice for you?
Yeah, a lot of it is staying humble. You're coming out of your domain, as it were, where you were the lion, you were the kingpin. You're going into someone else's domain where, like Jamie said, you may need to work up. You may need to learn from scratch a whole new industry. And the thing that, some players don't understand is there is no sympathy for players coming out of it, because to the average fan or the average person in the street, you've been a footballer, you're fine. You have never had the same pressures of the average person working in the office. But this is where I go back to the fact that players aren't all robots. And if you go into the work environment and you're humble and you want to learn, people will accept you and go, actually, you're not what I thought you were. Not all players are arrogant. Not all players have an ego the size of Big Ben. You do want to learn and you will get on. Little things like that go a long way in new industries. Wanting to learn, being humble, being personable, showing a human side to it. Because you don't see that on the pitch. Your gladiators going out 11v11 to go and beat each other. That's what the fan sees in you. They don't know what your personal traits are. So going into an office environment, being humble and being personable is massive. But I think what is open to players now is the growth of the game from a commercial perspective that we've spoken about, where the increase in games on TV has opened the doors to a lot more punditry opportunities than there were before. The increase in clubs having a global initiatives open the doors to ambassadorships and ex-players doing work for clubs in Asia or in America. So there are a lot more opportunities open to the players if they plan accordingly, but again, show the right attitude. Go in with the shake hands, smiles, be humble, work hard.
I think, coming to Marlon's point, and Jamie touched on it as well, it's like you say, being back to square one, first year of school. It's, whilst you've played football, yes, as a scholar, you're learning the trade. And then, as Jamie said, as a 39-year-old playing with an 18-year-old, they don't even remember certain games. Oh, you scored an FA Cup final. Oh, and then you work out, actually, when the FA Cup final was played, they were 7 years old and stuff like that. So kind of that stuff is strange to kind of do. But whilst working for Sky, yes, I'm slightly experienced, but it's a new role as such, because now you're expected to do that little bit more. You're not just a guest anymore. Now you are effectively a co-host, and you're also a lead analyst and stuff like that. So you have to do that little bit more. So you're learning more about that. And then coming onto the agency side, now working with Marlon, it's everything's ripped up, because now I'm at the ground stage. So whilst I know what a contract looks like, yes, I've been a player and I've looked at contracts. How does Marlon get that contract done? What? How does he find out what the average pay is? How did he do this? How does he do that? I'm basically the apprentice that's learning everything from Marlon, from Matt, from others in the agency, and starting all over again. And that's where it comes down to, as Jamie said, just being attentive and being receptive to information that you're getting from people to try and make yourself the best in the new industry. And I think that competitive edge that we had from football, I think allows, for personally me, and I know Jamie's that kind of character, to want to be the best in the next field. I don't think either of us will want to just coast and be an average pundit or an average accountant or financial or agent. It just, you want to be the best at it, and you might not reach the best, but you'll die trying to be the best, because that's the competitive edge of what you bring.
I remember a quote from Ayrton Senna. I can't remember it verbatim, but he spoke about, towards obviously the end of his life now, we know subsequently, but he spoke about his life after motor racing and said he was looking forward to entering that phase, because being a racing driver was just one part of his life, and actually there was so much more to discover. And so I just wanted to finally end by asking you, Jamie, about the values, the things that you enjoy most about the life after sport. What has it given you?
Yeah, I mean, what I feel that football's given me more than anything is that two things: incredible memories up to this point, and secondly, a massive chance, and almost I feel like a leg up for someone who's 38, where I've had a career as such, but I've got the opportunity to have another career on the back of making great contacts in sport originally, and if anything other than that, it's a brilliant conversation starter because people are interested in sport in general. So when people ask what I'm doing now when I'm retired, it's given me that, and moving forward, I'm just excited, like Curtis is, just to be super open, receptive to learning, and enjoy, and try and be successful in another career. That's ultimately what I'm trying to achieve.
Agree?
Yeah, totally agree. I think, as you say, I think one thing I get is the feeling of being lucky. And whilst I wasn't lucky in terms of, I know I worked my proverbials off to get myself to be a professional footballer, but not only get from a professional footballer, get from a player that was released by Wimbledon as a kid to then be a Premier League player 4 years later. I know that took hard work. It didn't just happen. But I'm just appreciative of having the career. I think whilst you're in it, you're like, oh yeah, that moment, oh, have I done that, have I done that? But when you actually sit back and take it all in, it's like, listen, I played nearly 700 games in the professional game, played in Europe, played in the FA Cup final, played at Wembley a few times, blah, blah. Played for England on 21s and played for Sierra Leone. I just appreciate every part of it. And people say, oh, any regrets and any... It's like, no, because it was my story. I think your story is your story. And if you did this differently, yeah, that might have happened, but then this might not have happened. And I think, as Jamie said, the memories of football, as much as a lot of them are on pitch, there are so many memories off pitch, silly little things that wouldn't pay any attention to any other person, but you'll speak to a teammate from 10 years ago you've not spoken to, and they'll bring up that moment and it'll be like it was yesterday. And I think those are the kind of bonds and relationships that you have in football that I don't think you can get in any other workplace, where, like I say, if you're working in an office and you haven't spoke to Steve, who's worked next to you for the last 5 years, you've not spoke to him in 10 years. That'd be weird because you work next to him for 5 years. Whereas there's players in changing rooms. They've been effectively my best mate because they've sat next to me in the changing room for the last 4 or 5 years. We both leave, or one of us leaves, or whatever. You might not speak to them for ages until you play against them again. And then, but the time you do see them, it's hugs, it's kisses, it's like you were together yesterday. And I think it's a strained industry, football, that you can have that kind of togetherness, then separation. But as soon as you're back together, it's just, all over again. You're back in that group.
Yeah, I found it so informative and nice. I think really positive to hear some of your stories about that career transition, getting into something new, and just viewing it with the right lens, and what you're putting into what you do now. Fantastic from what I've seen in terms of the media. And I wish you all the best, particularly with the wealth management, Jamie Mackie. I'm not sure I'm the ideal client, but if you talk to Marlon or Curtis, you might have some fitting clients to start your little roster off. Really appreciate you being with us, Jamie, and giving us the time to tell your story.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for having me. Great podcast. Enjoyed it.
Really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for listening as well. This episode of The Decision Makers, as I say, I think a great listen. Hopefully we've kind of delved into an issue that maybe some of you might not face, but of course you all love players, ex-players, to see what they're doing now and to see how they're doing it, I think was really, like I say, informative and interesting. Remember, if you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, make sure you leave us a little bit of a rating there. Hit the notification button. You won't miss any of our episodes. You can follow us on social media. All the details will be in the description as well. And hopefully you will join us for the next episode of Decision Makers. We'll see you then.